Good morning. It's Lisa with Lisahealyourself, and today I want to talk about trauma. I want to continue this talking about trauma because it's so important to overcoming chronic illness. So if you haven't seen my last video about what is trauma, please go watch that because it'll give you a really good foundation as to has your personal identity been changed for the worse? Has it been changed and shattered in a way that you don't feel safe anymore in relation to your surroundings, in relation to your relationships, in relation to your environment, in relation to the world? So all trauma and trauma that continues to affect your life, whether it happened 20 years ago or 3 years ago, anything that continues to wreak havoc on your system, your nervous system, is unprocessed trauma. So this is trauma that isn't completed. Okay, so it's uncompleted trauma. It can get trapped in the body, it can get trapped in our subconscious, our unconscious, in our patterns, in our beliefs, where we have triggers come up and it affects us in real time. This trauma continues to affect our life and play out in real time. So let's talk about what makes trauma unprocessed. Okay, so when you experience this event that was so overwhelming for you, that changed you fundamentally for the worse, and it usually shuts us down in ways that make our nervous system feel unsafe. And this is why a dysregulated nervous system is a nervous system that's hypervigilant, that's looking around, that feels like it might be under threat. We hear a lot about this in healing. I talk a lot about the nervous system. I talk a lot about healing the nervous system. So what does that mean? Why is this nervous system in a hypervigilant, threatened state when it comes to unresolved trauma, when it comes to lessons that are not complete, not completely learned? So it's an incomplete learning experience. And we haven't had the learning or the growth to come through and complete the trauma, where we feel whole again. We feel like we're capable. We feel like we can handle it. We feel like we've learned and grown from this traumatic experience. We are resourced now. When we have this dysregulated nervous system or hypervigilant state nervous system, it usually is caught and trapped in a fight or flight response, in an overactive response. It could come out as over anxious or withdrawn, depressed. It can come out as broken and shut down or dissociated. There's many ways that trauma can get stuck in the body and play out in these, what I would call labeled states: anxiety, depression, dissociation, anger. So let's take chronic illness, because if you're on this channel, it's probably because you're suffering with chronic illness, chronic symptoms, chronic pain of some kind in your body. And when this happens, when the body expresses through illness or pain or symptoms or suffering, it's because it's talking to you, like we've been through, and we're not listening. We're not speaking the same language that the body is talking. And what it's essentially saying, a dysregulated nervous system is saying, I don't feel safe in relation to who I thought we were. So it breaks self-identity. I don't feel safe in relation to this environment that I'm in or the world at large, because I thought things were different. Okay, and so when we break these worldviews and personal identities, when trauma breaks them or shatters them open, it exposes an ego identity that was a construct that we created anyway, right? The ego always creates a construct, the story of who you are. But when that story gets broken or shattered, we see all at once that we're not in control of the world, that we're not safe, but that we are everything. But it's so overwhelming to see these cracks all at once, and not in a positive way. We've seen the negative side of why the ego creates this identity in the first place. When we see the beauty of what we can become, we can often unravel this ego in such a way that we know we are everything. We're in control. We feel like we are the gods and masters of our universe. And so disassembling our ego identity is a good thing because it's expanding us. But when we have trauma, our ego is shattered in a bad way and we contract. We contract and we're shut down, we're anxious, we're nervous, we're fearful, we're angry, we're crushed, we're grief-stricken, we're heartbroken, we're overwhelmed, we're hopeless, we're helpless, we're victimized, we aren't sure anymore. And our ego that we had built to protect us is shattered. And suddenly it's not doing the basic job of the ego anymore. And we feel more vulnerable, more exposed, more unsafe, more unsettled. And so we contract. Instead of expanding as this ego gets crushed, we contract. And we feel the nervous system takes over. The millions of years of evolutionary response to protect, to self-protect this organism and keep it safe and alive steps in. Because the ego isn't doing its job anymore. The ego can't do its job anymore. So the nervous system now, in a dysregulated state, in this hypervigilant state, takes over and says, I don't understand what happened. First of all, it's usually a lack of knowledge. And that's why when we try to heal ourselves without really going back and figuring out what actually happened, what are the events that led up to this major event happening, right? How could it have been different? How could I have protected myself? How could I have done something different? What actually happened that led to this? Because often what happens is that there's a major event with trauma and it seemingly comes out of nowhere. We don't see the events that led to that, so it shocks us. Often we have a shock trauma or a trauma that seems there's no learning that we can take from it because it seems like we're a victim, or it seems like it happened out of the blue, or it was beyond our control, or we simply just don't understand, now that it did happen, how we can heal it, overcome it, or prevent it from happening in the future. And without that knowledge, the mind spins. The ego spins and it starts creating more stories, more elaborate thoughts, and it allows all inputs, too many overwhelming inputs. Was it what I ate? Was it where I was? Was it my thought? Was it my behavior? Was it this environment? Was it like what led to this? What part did I play in allowing this to happen? This is often where we have guilt and shame and self-blame and hatred because we don't understand. And when we don't understand something, first we lash out and we blame the world, we blame others, and then ultimately we blame ourselves. What part did I play in this? Why can't I understand this? Why can't I understand how this event happened, how I can heal it, and how I can change it? And until we can fully wrap our minds around all the events that led up to this, we can't actually learn how we could have stopped it or how things could have played out differently. And when we don't see that, all we feel is a lack of control. And so the nervous system, with its years of evolutionary history, comes in to protect. And it looks at all the inputs now and it's hypervigilance to everything. Could have been this, could have been this, could have been this, could have been this. I don't know, I don't understand. I don't know how we got here. I don't know how this event happened. I don't know if it was environmental. I don't know if it was sorely because of this person. I don't know if it was a random act of bad luck. I don't know if it was something that built. I don't know if it was my decisions. I don't know if it was my processing. I don't know if it was unresolved trauma or patterns playing out in the past. I don't know if it's something I ate, something I drank, something I thought. The mind spins. And this is why we cannot heal from trauma. This is why we cannot heal. If this content resonates with you right now, please give this a like and subscribe, because these are the types of videos that you need to hear, that you don't want to miss, so that you can start to understand what led up to your chronic illness, what led you here. Because when the mind can understand it, contextually build this egoic story around it, we begin to feel safe again. And then we can start to expand and shatter those egos and grow beyond the ego. But the ego's job is to keep you safe and to feel safe and to construct a story which you buy, which you believe in, which you fully understand, and in which you can create patterns and adaptations in order to grow and change and maneuver yourself in this world that makes sense to you, that keeps yourself safe. And that's what the ego is meant to do. So the first step in healing your chronic illness is often understanding what happened. Understanding and telling your story many times, over and over. We tell this story as a way to understand it. We tell it in relation to the environment, the food, the current inputs that were happening at that time, everything that could have been happening, emotions, anything in our world, our outer world or our inner world that could have led to this. And we allow the ego to tell this story over and over. We're building a story. We're constructing something that we can identify with, buy into, hold on to, so that we can navigate in relation to what happened, and we can find our sense of self again. We can build a self-identity again. We can reconstruct our worldview again. That's how the ego comes in to help you. But often the ego is overprotective, and it worries more about keeping you safe and buying into this story so that you can find your place in relation to everything else going on around you. Right? So that you can survive, so that you can stay safe and you can adapt. You, the organism, the human organism, is next time potentially under threat or under harm. You can foreshadow what led to this, and you can stop it in the future from happening again, because you can use your processing, your emotion, you can use everything that you have, including this well-defined story that you've created to protect yourself. But often the ego doesn't fully understand what happened. So it makes things up, and it uses all these different inputs, too many. And it grabs onto things that aren't really the things. And it puts them there as decoys. Maybe it was the food. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was this past trauma that happened to me when I was 3 years old. Maybe that led to this. It grabs onto anything and everything it can, because the inputs are wide at this point when you're in a hypervigilant state. And it starts to build stories around all of these things. And it closes your world in. And that's because you don't really understand what led to the trauma, to this big event, or to your chronic illness at all. You don't understand really what happened. And so at the heart of healing, we first need to go back and understand, what is the story I tell myself? Because it is laden with so many inputs, and it may or may not be true. And what actually happened? What were the sequence of events that led to this? And how can I understand them, mind, body, and soul, in such a way that I can understand how I ended up at this overwhelming event, or this overwhelming trauma, or in this overwhelming situation, or with this overwhelming illness, how I ended up here. And so telling that story is part of the journey. But we want to be careful that we're not taking too many inputs and creating something that isn't true just to have a story. We want to go back and look at it with honest eyes. Emotionally, what led to this? Spiritually, what led to this? Physically, what led to this? We want to really look at what actually did lead to this. Not all the crazy stories that I've created in order to keep myself safe. But let's go back now and look at it with fresh eyes and determine what led me here. And then if I've had any re-traumatizations, or if I've had this pattern replay out, what led to that? So what is leading to these? Mind, body, heart, and soul. We want to play our story through all the aspects, but really look at it objectively. Try to detach, try to not get caught up in the spiral of the stories that are probably false and constructed just as a way that the ego has to maintain your identity, maintain your survival. Let's go back and actually look at the events that led up to this emotionally, psychologically, physically, right? What was going on? And then, was this my fault? In what ways was this my fault? Objectively. Through no fault of my own, maybe? But how did whatever events or my emotional patterns, what was leading up to this that I didn't recognize, that I couldn't see at the time, that I could have done differently? Because knowing this helps the ego to feel safer. Like, oh yes, I see. There was some big, heavy emotional events going on in my life that I wasn't willing to look at, or I buried under the rug, or I wasn't processing, or I was denying or rejecting, or I wasn't willing to face, that led to these patterns, that played this out, that led to this. Or physically, I was having a very toxic physical life from the diet I was eating or the environment that I was in. Like, what was going on that shouldn't have been, that led to the deterioration of my body, right? Or that led to the breaking point of my heart, my emotions, or personally, or in my mind. What was going on intellectually? Through the mind, the thoughts I was thinking, the focus, where was I putting my attention in my life? What were the relationships and the environment, and what was my relationship to my environment, to nature, to other people, to people in my life that I loved? Did I just go through big losses? We need to investigate. So you can get clear, mind, body, heart, and soul. What were the big things that led to this? Tap into that through journaling, or through meditating, or through thinking, through feeling somatically. What led this? And what was my role in this? Should I have let go of that person sooner? Should I have been more aware of my surroundings? Should I have taken care of myself better? Should I have addressed my emotional needs more? Should I have listened to my intuition or my inner soul? We need to get clear on what our parts were. And when we do that, we can construct an identity or a story that fits us back together in a worldview where we understand. When we understand, then we can learn and we can grow. But when we can't understand what led us there, what led us down this path, what led us to this big event or this huge major problem or turning point in our life, we can't learn from it. We can't grow. We can't expand. We can't gather tools. We can't self-soothe. We can't self-love. We can't address those emotional patterns that led us here, or those hurts, or those parts of ourselves that we've been keeping hidden. We can't look at those relationships objectively and know what we need to do, what repair work needs to be done, or who we need to walk away from. We don't look at what thoughts we're thinking and how we're creating our reality and where we're putting our focus in life and the types of things that we have our attention on. Right? We're not looking at our environment and the inputs and our sleep and what we're eating and our lifestyle and how it's contributing to this. We just see everything and we're grabbing everything. We're in a hyper-vigilant state because we don't know what led to the trauma or this major event, and then we don't know what led to subsequent traumas or subsequent, re-traumatizations or patterns or events that we've replayed or relived, we just see we don't understand it. We don't know what led us here. We don't know how it happened. We don't know how to fix it. And we certainly don't know how to prevent it from happening again. And so this is an unlearned part of our life. And when we can't know what happened, when we can't understand, we can't learn, we can't grow, we can't adapt properly, we can't build tools, we can't do any inner work. We cannot, because we're spinning our wheels thinking, I don't even know what happened. I don't know the truth. I don't know. And then we slip into victim consciousness, into helplessness, and we say it's bad luck, it's karma, it's just something that happens. I don't have any control. And we fall down into victim spiral, into a victim consciousness. We feel hopeless and helpless, and we feel like we don't have control over our own life. And it's simply because we haven't understood. We don't understood what happened. So we haven't been able to learn and grow from it and come out the other side processed, where we've learned, we've grown, we've understood, we've captured tools, and we've sufficiently answered our nervous system. Like, I understand this, I've grown from it, I've learned from it, I have tools, I know what to do next time. I understand how this happened, I know what we are lacking, I know how to make the right changes to ensure, or mostly ensure, because we can never ever be certain, that this isn't likely ever going to happen again. I do feel a sense of control now. I do feel a sense of expansion now. I can expand my world again. My identity, my ego, I can start to pull it apart and expand from it now. I can start to grow my worldview and who I am. I can start to disidentify with that story I needed in order to stay safe, because now I feel like I've grown emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. I've grown mind, body, heart, and soul in ways that make me stronger, in ways that make me better, in ways that make me more authentic, in ways that make me more aware, in ways that make me more whole, more complete. So this is what healing is. This is why the healing process is often confusing. Do I do it physically? You have to do it, all of it. You have to look at what physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually led you to that point. What were you missing? What were the tools? What were the patterns? So this is why healing is very personalized, because we have to first figure out what happened, and we have to be able to look at it objectively and know and believe, where we can understand enough. And understanding is so important, because now we can start to use tools, use healing tools. We can start to heal ourselves in all the ways that weren't healed that led to this point, right? We can start to heal ourselves emotionally. We can start to heal ourselves physically, spiritually. We can start to heal the mental mind and the thought patterns. We can start to heal ourselves with these healing tools, because we're not just spinning, and now we understand it. And once we understand it, we're clear. And we can build ourself and piece ourself back together in a way that lets the nervous system settle. It doesn't need to protect. It doesn't need to be so hypervigilant to hundreds and thousands of inputs anymore, because it knows why it's doing the healing work, and it knows it's trying to grow forward, expand out, create, bring back together into wholeness. This is always how we heal. Incomplete learning leads to an inability to complete the trauma process, because we need to learn and we need to grow. Understanding what happened that wasn't in our control, that was outside of us, and understanding what happened inside of us that was in our control, and knowing how to balance the tools to effectively project what's outside of our control, what we can do differently, and how we want to live our life differently and treat ourselves and others in order to avoid that happening, but also direct control. What can we do differently and how can we change in order to feel safe, feel like we're in control of our own safety, our own lives once again. And this is what the nervous system is waiting for. It's waiting for you to take back your personal power and feel like you're in control. But we can only do that when we understand, and then we learn, and then we grow, we resolve, and we're able to move forward in life. And the nervous system believes, yeah, I've got this. I can be pretty sure this isn't going to happen again. If it does, I have tools now that I can apply. And I know what areas of my life I need to work on. And I know where my patterns are and my weak spots. And I know physically where I'm not taking care of myself the best. And I know emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And I allow myself to grow better. I allow that worldview to be put back together, and that self-identity to be put back together, not in a protective hard shell and a hypervigilant system that stays locked in trauma, but in a way that allows me to grow and become more of and more complete and more expansive and more capable and more assured and more at peace and more safe in this world. And so that is how we overcome trauma. And learning and growing often comes from going back and looking objectively and getting a clear understanding. Creating and constructing a true story, a story that's not fabricated, that's not built in this self-protection way, but is a real, clear, objective view of what happened. What happened in all these different areas of my life? Where was I responsible? Where can I then forgive myself? Where can I grow? Where can I become who I need to be so that it doesn't happen again? That's what we're waiting for. That's a nervous system that can relax. That's a nervous system that can stop living in the fight or flight. Stop being hypervigilant to thousands of inputs a day. That's a nervous system who understands itself, who's coming back home, is more authentic, is more whole, and who can once again begin to expand in the world. So I hope that this video has been helpful, and I will see you in the next video.